Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us on the program. Let's get back to it. And this time around, we're focusing on the 2023 general elections, the outcome, the conduct, and the roles played by the different stakeholders. Today, YIAGA Africa, one of the civil society organizations who deployed officials to monitor that election, had come out to say in a 90-page report released, the organization says it's more of a dashed hope. What was done by INEC and other stakeholders, and there were a lot of disappointment. Let's get straight to it. I have joining me the chair of the board of YIAGA Africa, Dr. Hussaini Abdul. Thank you so much, Doc, for joining us tonight. Let's get straight to it. That document, which was released at that press conference and which you made public today, was a question mark tagged title, Dashed Hope. But if you look at that document, it was more or less a statement of a dashed hope, a disappointment coming from your report. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think, Sean, thank you very much. It is indeed the case that despite all the commitment, the passion, the drive, the resources, the promises that came from both INEC, from us as major actors in elections, at the end of the day, the processes did not actually give us exactly what we expected. So we put it in question mark, dash hope, because it's a conversation we are putting out there, and we don't want to live in a country whose election is hopeless. So it's a question mark. So we can't say it's a disappointment, but with what we have, the details of the recommendations, the actions that we have proposed, we think that when fully implemented, we can regain public confidence in our electoral process, and probably our subsequent elections can actually be better.
What was the most disappointing thing that your organization discovered?
I think the most disappointing thing has to do largely with what inspired Nigerians, what made people to have so much confidence in the elections. And that actually has to do with this electronic transmission of results, particularly the IRIs, and what people expected of it. So the inability to actually transmit this result real time was the biggest disappointment, and it ended up also becoming a major definer of the elections. We recognize that there are some good things that came out from that elections, of course, and we did highlight that in the report. But the attention, almost a global attention, was actually on the role of the IRF. And then once that failed, and the first day, it was a huge, huge disappointment. And therefore, people didn't even recognize that it did work during the gubernatorial elections and all that. So I think that's the biggest of all the disappointment. The second one would be logistics, which has been a recurring decimal in our electoral history, particularly in recent time. And we also saw that rearing its ugly head in some states during the presidential elections. And that, despite all the arrangement, despite all the commitment, that also failed, and it was also a major disappointment. I think the disappointment with electronic transmission is not simply just because we had a glitch, but also because we didn't get the right explanation, despite the demands that we made once we begin to experience it. So INEC did not come out quick enough to tell us what was going on. And if you look at the cover of our report, you will actually see that that cover is made up of when we raised the alarm about the glitch and the time that INEC issued a statement to explain what actually happened. You will see the time lag. And I think that this combination of factors probably undermined some of the good things that actually came out from the elections.
So, two things. Did you imagine, or did you have a feeling as an organization that something untoward was happening behind the scene?
Not really, particularly that this organization had worked very closely with INEC and had a very good relationship and access in INEC, and we commend INEC leadership for that. We have also been part of the process of the initial use of the IRA, and that was in Ekiti elections and also in Osun elections. And we saw how good that was and how that had contributed in the transparency of the electoral process in those two states. We were also part of the process of INEC pre-test, the test of the use of all the major technological facilities that INEC was going to deploy. And so we didn't expect this. We were high up, particularly that we have also set up a system that also helped to relay whatever is actually coming from IRA, which is our IRAD structure. We have recruited a massive number, over 1,300 people to support the process of downloading this result from the INEC IRA. So we have a structure. We've had our linkages with the television and show. You happen to be one of the key anchor of that. We brought all our resource people who will actually help in the analysis of the result and the IRAD. Unfortunately, that failed. So we didn't expect this to happen. We are not in position to say whether it was deliberate or accidental. We have that in our report. We are not in position to say that, but we were really disappointed that it didn't work out.
When you talked about the time lapse from when you approached INEC with your worries about the process and the time when they responded, what were you thinking INEC could have done differently from what it did?
Yeah, we actually think, and for me, INEC should probably have had a crisis communication system in place, probably have done some scenarios in communications. And normally when you are going into a big project of this nature, part of what you do is to build crisis scenarios and say, if this happens, we react this way. If this happens, we react this way. If this happens, we react this way. You need to have that plan, not because you think those things will happen, but because you don't want to be taken off guard. So what we had expected at that moment is for INEC to come up with a statement and say, look, we are experiencing some difficulties with our systems. We are not in position to say exactly what is happening, but we are checking, we are analyzing, and we'll be updating you as we progress on this. It's a one-paragraph statement recognizing that this is happening and then saying that you are going to be updating that information from time to time. And probably you come back every 1 hour, every 2 hours, every 5 hours, and you are providing that update. People know that you recognize that something went wrong and you are indeed working to address it.
There are a long list of recommendations and highlights that you have made, from reforms that you have advised that needs to be made. You've talked about the fact that technology is no longer a silver bullet as far as the electoral process in Nigeria is concerned. You have talked about the ambiguity, the complexity, the inadequacy with the election legal framework. We thought that the 2022 electoral law was somewhat a good law that would give us a good election. You talked about appointments into INEC. You talked about procedures in INEC. A whole lot of issues that you have raised. But in 30 seconds, if there's anything that needs to be done to salvage the situation, rescue INEC's reputation going into these 3 elections that we have in November, what would that be in 30 seconds, Doc?
I think one will still be logistics, that perennial problem. And then INEC, of course, we saw improvement in the gubernatorial elections because we cannot expect any reform or changes in the electoral laws before these off-season elections. So one is the logistics in terms of INEC plan. Two, INEC have to assess to actually see whether its use of road transport workers as major vendors in terms of its transportation, whether it's still okay. I think it is not okay. Probably INEC needs to begin to engage logistics companies to support its logistic effort. There are strong logistic companies in the country that can be deployed, and they will go, they will get the vehicles, and they will get these things out. There are various different institutions that actually use such company in big deployment, and I think that may help INEC to address the logistics side. I think INEC also need to test all its technological devices that actually supports the elections, not just the beavers, but also test run the IRF and check to see where there are issues and address them. And then INEC will need to refine its communications. Election is a huge project. When you are dealing with a big project of this nature, you must have a clear communication plan. And I think that doing that will probably help in dealing with some of the challenges we've had in the last elections. INEC have to learn from what happened in these last elections and ensure that we make those amendments while we are looking at the bigger things that we can do in preparation for the next general elections.
I'm very sure, Dr. Hussaini Abdul, yourself and your YIAGA team are not the only disappointed persons. There are those along list of Nigerians who are disappointed with the outcome, the conduct, and the process in the election. And INEC has said they are also disappointed in some areas, and they will do better, hoping that things will get better as we move forward. Thank you so much. Dr. Hussaini Abdul is the chair of the board of YIAGA Africa. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sharon. Thanks for having me. Keep doing the good work. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.